Coming up on the Otago Opportunity, we're talking to Pat Brittenden from the award-winning Big Hairy Network.
This is the Otago Opportunity, a limited series look at the future of our province. I'm your host, Pauline Moore, and in this series, we're taking the policies of the Opportunity Party and moving them out of the Wellington think tank and into our own backyard here in Dunedin. Each week, we'll hear from local business owners, students, and families about how a tax reset or a citizens' assembly would actually impact their daily lives. It's not about the politics, it's about the future of the place we call home. Welcome to the Otago Opportunity.
Kia ora, and welcome to the Otago Opportunity. Joining me today is Dave Bainbridge-Zafar, the Opportunity candidate for Dunedin. Welcome, Dave.
Kia ora.
And our guest, Pat Brittenden from the Big Hairy Network. Welcome to our podcast, and thank you for coming to talk to us, Pat.
Kia ora, but different being on this side of it, but let's do it.
Excellent. The Big Hairy News is a podcast based in Dunedin and produced by Doc Studios, which is the Department of Conversation. Is that right?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
That's all changed. When I started doing some podcasting based out of Dunedin, we did a show called the Department of Conversation, which was just telling interesting stories, talking to interesting people. But that was how we were running it for the start of it. But when it became sort of its own entity, we changed it all. Doc Studios became the Big Hairy Network. And because we realized we had sort of a network of shows, and so that's what kind of it evolved into. So Doc Studios or Department of Conversation is certainly a part of our origin story, but it's not what we run under at the moment.
And so can you tell us a little bit then about how it did start and how long you've been running, and what did you set out to achieve with it originally?
Well, the Department of Conversation, DOC, that's still available on the YouTube channel. You can still go and watch previous episodes. It was just, I think it was a response to, I actually remember what it was a response to, because it was a real specific moment that I was on the TVNZ website, and there was a story on the website, and the story had, I was going to say 14 seconds, but I think it was less than that. It might have been 7 seconds of video. And I kind of took a little bit of personal umbrage at that, thinking I can handle more than 7 seconds of audio or video. It's like, do we really have to dumb this world down as much as that? Like, have we really turned our content into a morsel, bite-sized world where we can only expect our viewers to stay still to watch 7 seconds of video? And that kind of took me down the path of long-form interviews, probably of the era. Joe Rogan was still a pretty big name and probably the biggest in the world at the time, sort of thing. So people often kind of compared it to those long form conversations, and I guess they kind of were. But I wanted to be able to have a conversation with someone interesting and talk until we were finished, not talk until the ad break was due or the news is coming up, so we better stop, until we were finished. That is still sort of the philosophy we have in Big Hairy News, because when people come on for an interview, so Doc has kind of stopped, although it may come back up at some stage. I think there's about 300 episodes or 250 episodes of that. But where that has evolved into is I had this idea to do a daily news show. In America, it is very common to have sort of commentary podcasts on YouTube. The left of politics and the right of politics sort of do it. Lots of names in there that people who, I guess, ingest podcast material would probably recognize. And I thought there's literally none of those in New Zealand. So what can we do with this? And I started out with quite highfalutin ideas, thought I was the shit, and thought I'd be able to do this thing and it would blow up and be massive straight away. So I was lucky enough to be connected to a whole bunch of really high profile comedians. And I did a proposal together that was like, I would run this thing and every day I would have a different comedian come on board and it would be massive. And of course, TVNZ wants to produce this, or of course someone else, let's do it. And so we started this thing with the same sort of philosophy of we want to talk until we're finished. So when people say to me, how long's the interview going to be? I kind of go, I don't know. somewhere between 15 minutes and an hour, to which most of our kind of conversations where we have guests, I mean, a 15-minute conversation with the guest would be incredibly short for us. An hour conversation would probably be long. But, 25 to 40 minutes is sort of our normal conversation. And the beauty of that, obviously, like we were doing this during COVID, and someone like Susie Wiles would come on, and Susie Wiles would literally get 12 seconds on TVNZ, then talk to us for 35 minutes to really delve deeply into it. And so my highfalutin ideas at the start that I'd get all these amazingly high-profile comedians to come on board, and they were all signed up, and I had the proposal, and we'll just go and sell this to TVNZ, and no one was interested. It was just like I couldn't even, because what I was trying to do is ride the coattails of famous people for my own benefit. But it just didn't work. And so eventually I kind of went, I can't keep talking to these comedians who, you'll see on Friday night on 7 Days sort of thing, and expect them to keep doing this stuff for the love of it. So I decided I need to perhaps take a slightly different path. Chewy was a part of the sort of rotation then, and I liked having someone who was local, and we just kind of started doing it. And every now and again we're like, why are we still doing this? We're approaching 1,000 episodes of BHN now, and it has a really large reach now. And so my big idea at the start to have this big podcast and, all these things, it's funny, I've just been watching a little documentary on how beavers can bring back an ecosystem. They're like these foundational animals that you release them into an environment and everything around it pops up. It's kind of what we've done. I don't know whether Chewy or I are the beaver, but we've just kind of started this thing, and then this community has popped up around us. And I've been working in media since the late 90s. I started on music radio and that sort of thing. And I've done all the biggest brand radio stations, and I've done presenting on TVNZ, and I've worked as a talkback host on News Talk ZB. But no matter what I've done, I've never, ever, 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 ever experienced the kind of community that's built up around us. And I think the lesson for me is you couldn't purchase this kind of community. If we went to a mainstream media outlet and they got NZ On Air funding, and all of a sudden we were broadcasting on a nationwide network or a nationwide radio station, you have listeners or you have viewers, but from experience, you don't have community. There's a difference. And that's the one thing that I've really experienced with this, and that's having this amazing community, active community around us. I'm talking a lot here, but I guess the one thing about the community that I'll just end with is maybe 18 months ago, I don't know, it could have been 2 years ago. This last 6 years, it's just all kind of compressed, hasn't it? I got COVID, and so we went for a week without shows. And when I came back to the shows, this is when I realized the community thing. I realized there was this community that we had become a part of, and that we were, I guess for want of a better word, servicing 4 nights a week, and they were a part of us. And I kind of felt a bit of a burden or a bit of a responsibility that we can't just disappear. We can't just disappear, and if someone's not available, we can't just go, no, we'll see you in 10 days, because it's not only like we are part of their lives as they are part of ours, which is when we started to look for, I guess, what you would call a couple of part-timers. We don't really run, like a full-time, part-time employed thing. There's a lot of, for the love of it being done. But that's when we started looking for some fill-ins on a Friday night, and they are now a part of who we are. And when I'm away, Emily, who works on Friday night, she fills in. And when Chewy's away, Emily or Magenta fills in for Chewy, and I sort of run the show. So we've ended up with this amazing community around us.
So what makes that community? What draws people in?
What draws them in? It's maybe a question you'll have to ask them. but the sense of what I get from them is they hear voices that they don't hear anywhere else. We get a lot of, I don't feel alone. We get a lot of, oh my gosh, I've just come across you. How come I didn't know this existed? I think it's that people feel seen and listened to. And when more so Chewy than me, because he's the lunatic. But when one of us kind of goes off on a topic and we're angry or loud or, verbose or whatever, it's the kind of thing that these people are thinking, and yeah, I think.
So you connect with them. Then.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the right word. There's not quite the right word, but it's in the right chapter. We're sort of their eyes on the world on some level. We're advocates for them, because what we're advocating for and what we're pushing for and what we're challenging people, especially politicians, on is the things that they are struggling with or they want to see challenged, because they're sitting in their lounges or their cars or their whatever, also going, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my community? And yeah, we agree. And this is what they're drawn to, I think.
So your podcast is unashamedly left-leaning, or transparently so. So what's informed your politics and values, and have they always been as they are?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Probably everyone on the left is much better looking than people on the right. That's probably a part of it.
There might be some people that would protest about that.
There must be very ugly people, probably deep down. I mean, they look beautiful, but deep down. No, I think I don't ever remember having sort of an awakening, or I don't remember being particularly politically active when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s. I started working at ZB when I was in my 30s, and that kind of forced me to start looking at because you talk about the news, this is what talkback is. And I guess the stuff that made sense to me typically sat on the left. I think the stuff that was always a bit kind of out there and this doesn't feel right was stuff, and I'm sure we all agree on this, you don't have left and right. There's a much bigger spectrum than that. But for the sake of the expedience of this conversation, it just, like, there's examples of things that, like, I also, right, so my kaupapa, the thing I want most of all is, and you can use sort of an old trite saying like, we're only as strong as our weakest link, or chain's only as strong, or you can just go, it's the vulnerable in society that need to be uplifted more than anything. I have religion in my background quite heavily, and I grew up Catholic, and I still think about, the teachings around that. And for me, at least, the most important teachings are sort of looking after the widows and orphans, and I don't care what anyone tries to convince me of in that religious world. You'll never convince me that the right looks after the widows and orphans better than the left. It's just, so probably my upbringing, I grew up in a large Catholic family, Irish mother, that was sort of our foundational stuff. I'm not part of the Catholic Church anymore or anything, but what I saw in there was people doing sort of good works. My dad was always supporting causes, especially financially, and part of Rotary and part of the Lions Club and this group called the Hibernians, and they raised money, and he was involved with Make-A-Wish, and that just seems to be a part of what they did in that community. And that I've probably never said this out loud as plainly as this, but probably I've never been asked a question to think about, but that's probably the foundation of where I ended up politically, which is ironic because I'm pretty sure my mum and dad always voted National. But what I saw in them was looking after the widows and orphans. And then when I came to ZB, I wear this as a badge of honor. I was an overnight guy, so I was literally bottom of the barrel. I was the one that got nothing. But I was the most complained about host on News Talk ZB. And part of that is because, I guess, a part of my rationale for conversations is, if I understand what you're thinking, if you can show me why you're thinking it, even if I don't agree with you, I'll go, I can see how you got there. But of course, on ZB, as soon as you go, why? Then they get pissy with you because you're challenging them. So I'd ask lots of questions like why, or like, and then what? And okay, let's play that out to its full extreme. What happens next? And yeah, many of those talkback callers didn't like that. But yeah, I guess I've been shaped by my upbringing, and probably, I don't know, intelligence, good common sense. I mean,
So you obviously had that real sense of community as a child, and that's one of the things you really like about your job now, that same sense of community. So that's obviously really important.
Yeah, the Catholic Church is both a demonic thing. Everything's got its goods and its bads, but I ended up going through the Catholic school system. I went to boarding school, loved boarding school. Like, a lot of people have horror stories about them. I loved it. For me, it was, I had 30 of my best mates with me all the time. Someone always to throw a rugby ball around with, someone always to go up to the shop and play spaces with. I loved it. But that's community. So
And what was the reason for boarding school?
Choice, really. I lived on one side of Auckland, the school's on the other side of Auckland. I was a day boy for a while. It was an hour commute each way. And then for the last 2.5, nearly 3 years of school, I went boarding. It's great. Loved it.
And you talked, Pat, there about your time in, mainstream media. You were on News Talk ZB and various other radio stations, and you've won awards for your broadcasting around the world.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view of the current kind of mainstream media setup now that you're in the kind of independent media space?
I mean, if I'm absolutely honest with you, I don't pay a lot of attention to a lot of it. Like, I loved doing talkback. I left talkback still loving it, but I knew there was no path for me to move forward. But I loved that job. And from when I left that job, like now, honestly, I wouldn't listen to it for an hour a month. I wouldn't listen to it for maybe even an hour a year. So there's those worlds. Probably the most I listen to, like talkback, for example, is when we are commenting on it on the podcast. So it's almost like listening to it for work. My view of the mainstream media right now is probably equal parts disappointed and sad, because what's happening financially to the mainstream media makes our country, I think, a less safe place. That the voice of the fourth estate is incredibly important in a healthy democracy, and to see groups fold and go under and disappear. And then you've got a political system at the moment where people literally are saying we should defund RNZ and TVNZ. Like, every country in the world needs a public broadcaster. On the flip side of that, some of the stuff I see, I think there's always been this adage that the right-wing shock jock does get listeners. Like, and you see that, I think we see that coming into New Zealand media, mainstream media, more and more and more. I think the news groups do a good job, TVNZ News, Stuff News, they do a perfectly adequate job. Where we're missing out is like really good, solid commentary, deep analysis, long-term investigations, because they all cost money and they don't generate much of a return. And that's why a public broadcaster is so important. I wish they had got that, when they were going to join up RNZ and TVNZ, I wish they had done that. I wish they had done that, and they had to then run RNZ and TVNZ like BBC, World News and BBC One radio station. So what that would be absolutely, and the combined resources of both parties making it viable again to do long form stuff and investigations, because then you're not required on making an income or a profit on that time. So yeah, equal parts sad and disappointed, because to be safe, we need people to be brave and step out of the boat. But that comes with risk. And if it doesn't land, then you lose money in the mainstream. So therefore people play it safe. That makes me sad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading something years ago saying that one of the reasons New Zealand has never really become extreme is because we don't really have a national newspaper. We have all these, Otago Daily Times, regional newspapers around the place, which has meant that a Murdoch or someone like that hasn't come in and been able to shift the national conversation, because when you read your local paper, it's full of local stories. You ever been tempted to go into print media?
Nah, dyslexic, bro. I mean, I used to write a fair bit on my own blogs and that kind of stuff, but my boss at ZB used to constantly tell me, "You're the only person I know who uses 10 words when 5 is all you need." So that's okay when you're doing a podcast. That's not so good when you're writing a piece and it's twice as long as it needs to be.
How do you decide on your content and your guests, and how much thought goes into that?
It's really hard, especially literally right now, because there is just so much reporting going on out there. Like, it's really, really hard to decide what we're going to talk about. And honestly, we get criticized by our own community sometimes for not covering what they want, which is fine. I pitched the idea of this kind of podcast thing to a few media outlets, and it was going to be called The Front Page, which ironically is now a podcast on NZME, because it was basically what's on the front page of the paper. So I think primarily what drives our talk is primarily the big stories. However, like even last night in our show, we did a piece out of the Hui, and that wasn't necessarily it was topical because it was involving the Common Key, but it wasn't topical to something happening on that day. So probably most of what we do is the headline stories. I don't know, 2/3, and a third of what we do might not be, let's say half of what we do is headline stories, a quarter of it is things that we just find interesting that are unrelated to New Zealand, and a quarter of them are things that are interesting related to New Zealand, probably more often than not have a news angle in them as well.
Media bias is a really interesting one, and certainly since I've started, running for politics with the Opportunity Party, and I post a story from RNZ or I post a story from the Herald, I get comments saying, "Oh, well, of course RNZ would say that, they're so left-wing," or "Of course the Herald would say that, they're so right-wing." You guys are unashamedly left-wing. How do you handle the kind of accusations of bias?
Well, we're biased. So, I mean, there's two things, right? I don't care about bias. I care about accuracy. I don't care how biased you are, how in the tank you are for any group or whatever. If you're accurate, that's all that matters. And people who accuse you of being biased or showing bias, what they're saying is, you're saying things I don't agree with. That's what they're saying. We are, like me and Chewy, each election cycle, we'll put out our political compass. That's how open we are to do with who we are. And I think I forget what I've written, but I think on half of our platforms it says, New Zealand, home of New Zealand's progressive news. Like, we don't hide it. What you'll find is other people in the independent media, they hide it. They try and sell the bullshit lie that they are middle of the road, and they're not. So we're biased, but I also think we're accurate. And I think you see that as well in our criticisms of, in particular, Labour, right? We're quite critical of Labour. And look, I don't know who I'm voting for this year. I really don't. But I certainly have been a Labour voter. I could tell you what side of the political spectrum I'm voting, but I don't know who I'm voting for. But we have been very, very critical of Labour, because sometimes people who are sort of on your side need a kick in the ass. So that would be my answer always. It's like, yes, we're biased. Now tell me where I'm wrong. Yeah. You're biased too. Everyone's biased. We just admit it.
Have you done your political compass yet?
No, haven't done it this time. Last time, Chewy was a tiny bit more authoritarian than me, and I've held it over his head for a very long time. But we were like bottom left. We were like down with Gandhi and stuff. I think that's where he was.
Be interesting to see where opportunity comes in your political compass.
Yeah.
Pauline asked about how you choose content. You're organising some debates coming up soon. You've got, I think, 4 debates scheduled.
Yeah.
You've not chosen to invite opportunity. Why is that, Pat?
I haven't chosen to invite lots of people because there's other political parties out there as well. It's just you need a line in the sand, and I've made the decision that the line's going to be current MPs, or at least current parties. Paul Henry's doing one of them. He's obviously not a current MP, but he's involved with a current party. And to be really blunt with you, there's not necessarily any right or wrong or good or bad. It's just a line we've chosen to draw. I do know that more, like we've also cut out other parties. Like, we're not having every party to every election either. I mean, every debate either. So, for example, I'm not sure when this goes to air, but our first one is on August the 1st in Dunedin, and we've got ACT, Labour, Greens, and New Zealand First. So there's no National and there's no Te Pāti Māori either. So, you know, that's just why.
And chose not to attend.
Didn't invite Te Pāti Māori. Spoke to National, and they declined.
Why have you chosen not to invite TPM?
Because, and this is what it comes down to, we are not, I feel that we don't have the space or time to have 5 or 6 people on stage. It always just comes down to what we're able to produce as well. Te Pāti Māori's come into some of the other ones. Like, we are having 5 on stage for the treaty debate. But it's just a programming position. Like, we talk to Te Pāti Māori a lot in the show. We're not eliminating them from our conversation, obviously. But I felt as a producer of the show that we needed a bit more strict, tight time frames to make this thing work properly. And that's kind of what it comes down to. And that's what it comes down to for Opportunity as well.
How are you planning on managing, in the run-up to the election, not just with the debates, but with the show, exposure for those smaller parties, the likes of Alliance and the 10 other parties that exist out there that no one's ever heard of?
Yeah, unlikely that they'll get any exposure in our Monday to Thursday show. Like we've had Alliance on once before, but the reason we had them on was because they had an interesting story. It was kind of the rebrand and relaunch of these guys and these groups. I can't imagine. I mean, we've talked to Q from Opportunity twice, I think, so far. Last election, I think 2 or 3 times we spoke to RAF. So like, we're not eliminating people from our conversation full stop. But I like, to be honest with you, you know, I don't even know what the little parties are, but like Vision New Zealand and the Destiny Church Party and those guys that are, you know, kind of polling nothing. I mean, we're all, put it this way, we're already not doing, we don't have enough time already to do some of the biggest news stories of the day. And I need to make sure that we service our community well enough, and to put in an interview with a party that's on 0.001%, I don't think that services our audience. Yeah. So there's going to be lines drawn everywhere depending on.
It's always a surprise when you get your voting paper and there's like 20 parties that you've never heard of on there.
Yeah, but we're part of the Media Council, and so we are, you know, accountable to the kind of standards expected. And there's no political party that is either in politics or might be in politics that won't or hasn't been on our show.
Mm-hmm. What I'm going to ask you a double question, Pat. I'm going to ask you, first of all, what you think Opportunity's chances are of getting into Parliament and clearing that 5% threshold. And also, like you say, you've met Q a couple of times. What is your view on Opportunity as a party generally?
Opportunity is an enigma. I've been very, very, very clear with Raf when he came on, and with Q. Because of where I sit politically, it's impossible for me to vote for Opportunity. And that's because Q has said part of the selling point of Opportunity is they could go with either side. I cannot vote for a political party that might give Luxon 2.0. So that's where I sit. Other people sit other places, that's all cool. But I just know how this government has treated and affected and impacted the most vulnerable people in New Zealand. If I was to give a vote to a party that then made this government 2.0, I would be distraught. So even though I look at Opportunity's website and I like some of the stuff I read, I even said this to Raf. I like talking to Raf. I like the kind of words. You can't have my vote if there is a possibility you could go with a Luxon-led government. So that's my personal view. I think opportunity is an enigma because we did this last night, follow the money. Where is the money coming from behind opportunity? There are, will I call them far right? I don't know. Right-wing big tech oligarchs that give 200,000 to ACT, to New Zealand First, and to National, who are giving money to opportunity. What's that all about? There is another tech guy who was working in a audio system that's given 100 grand. What's up with that? Philip Mills, who is obviously a very large supporter of the Greens, is given 100 grand. So if I'm following the money, opportunity, and you guys can correct me, but opportunity doesn't seem to have a constitution like, for example, the Greens have a constitution where they go to the members to help decide policy. So if opportunity gets a position where they are going to be in government and decide what their bottom lines are, is it the big oligarchs and the money behind it that are going to be putting their thumb on the scale or not? The policies look green coded. The money in general, not all of it, but in general, looks right coded. So I struggle to see actually who they are. And finally, on what I think will happen, I don't think opportunity will get there. I think you'll see the opportunity numbers going down over the next couple of months. When people start to, what's going to happen is Luxon and Christopher Hipkins are going to continue to say we won't work with Top, and then people are going to start to go, oh, my vote might get wasted. Okay, no, I'm going to vote elsewhere. The reason Winston Peters is in Parliament today is that at the last election, Christopher Hipkins ruled him out, and he was flaving around that 4% sort of thing. And then Christopher Luxon ruled him in, and he got over the line easily. I don't think you'll see anybody rule opportunity in, and I think that'll be part of the last chance for this. I'm sorry to be a downer, but that's what I think. And when I say this on my show, I then also end it by saying, but I'm always wrong. So but that's what my gut tells me. My gut tells me that they won't be there. I'm
going to correct you on a couple of things.
Cool.
You talked about kind of tech oligarchs donating to opportunity. You're using a plural where a singular is really necessary there. Brian Cartmel is the guy you're talking about who donated to ACT and National.
Well, there's the guy who did the sound audio stuff as well. The guy who funded.
So the guy who does the sound audio is a guy called AJ Wilderland. He's a Kiwi and he's on our board. I assume that's who you're referring to. He's a kind of created a bunch of DJ software stuff, but he's on our board, and you can read our constitution and find out all about him. The guy, he's, I would arguably a left-wing donor, I would think, but you could ask him and research him. In the same way that Philip Mills, who donates money to Greens and Labour, has donated to us as well.
Yep, I see Philip's done that.
Brian,
we've asked Phil for I don't know him personally, but I've spoken to him numerous. We've asked him for an interview because genuinely I'd like to know what he sees in the party, and that's not because you shouldn't see it in the party. It's like I'd like to understand. There's Ian Cooperis, part of the alumni of the New Zealand Initiative. New Zealand Initiative is one of the worst things in New Zealand for dis and misinformation. So, and look, I'm not trying to attack opportunity. I don't know, but you have this. I think there is a fair philosophy to go. What do these people see in this organisation? Let's not make it personal.
Yep.
And I talked about this the other day. It was like Posey Parker, who did that whole kind of protests around the world about what is a woman and that kind of stuff. She had the Nazis turn up to her protest in Melbourne, and she disavowed them and it's no part of us, and that's cool. But then the question needs to be asked: what do they see in your message that would have them come along to support your rally, even if they're nothing to do with you? So my question for some of this money is: what do they see in your message? What does Brian Cartmel see in your message? Yours being opportunity, not personal. That when you look at his, for example, Twitter account, the Elon Musk, David Seymour, Eric Crampton of New Zealand Initiative, Free Speech Union, Taxpayers Union, National MP Joseph Mooney, Annie O'Brien, and Elon Musk are the people that he retweets. What does he see in opportunity that draws him to opportunity. I'd like to understand that, because I think there's some mixed, not from you guys actively messaging, but there's some mixed stuff going on at the moment. Like that doesn't sound like the kind of person who would support a party who says they can work with the Greens. You know what I'm saying?
So my answer to that, and he would have a better answer because he's the guy, but my understanding is he's a big fan of solar energy and is a big supporter of rewiring Aotearoa, and that's why he supported us, because we've obviously massively supportive of renewable energy and solar, and that's something he's passionate about as well. I believe that's why he's supported us. But yeah, I completely agree that when you look at him on paper, he's probably not the kind of guy I want to be best friends with. So that's a fair point. But yeah, as I understand it, he's a big supporter of solar energy, and that's why he's donated to Opportunity.
Well, I mean, like, it'd be interesting to know if he's ever donated to the Greens then, because the Greens have been leading the country for a long time in their plans around solar. I suspect not. So what makes the difference, you know? Labor, it would appear within the industry, Labor's plan for solar is streets ahead of National's plan for solar, but is he going to give money to Labor because of that? I suspect not. So again, I don't, there's no criticism here. These are just observations. It's like, what does he see? And if it's just he's giving money just because of solar, that doesn't make sense to me as a commentator, because there are other parties who are guaranteed to be there, who have got very good or better, maybe not better, but other solar plans as well, including National and also Labor.
Yeah, fair enough. I just want to go back to your other point around this government and Luxon 2.0 being your kind of big fear. Is an Opportunity National coalition not a better option than another National Act New Zealand First coalition?
I mean, eating a handful of shit's better than a bucket full of shit as well. You know, it's like, is that the yardstick? Okay, I guess I'll only eat a handful of shit then. Look, I'm not going to do anything. This is just my personal view now. I'm not going to do anything that potentially could lead to the most vulnerable people in New Zealand being worse off. Now, one could argue Labor and the left hasn't been great either, sure, but I'm prepared to trust the left more with those. Let me ask you this one question, right? And this is a question that I'm going to ask in my debates. So you know how this government has made lots of cuts and changes because they've needed to find money for whatever projects they've got. There's not enough money to pay for the things in New Zealand at the moment. So this government's cut and they've cancelled all the things. Can you guys identify a single cut, a single policy that's a cut or a clawback that's impacted the top 10%? Because there's tons of them that have impacted the bottom 10%. But the people who have the most money, the top 10%, they're getting richer at the moment under this government. They're getting more kickbacks under this government. The people at the bottom, the poorest people in New Zealand, the most vulnerable people in New Zealand, are the ones that this government is getting money back from whilst giving billions of dollars back to landlords. You're never going to convince me that eating a handful of shit is so much better than a bucket full of shit. And that obviously isn't saying that Opportunity is shit. I'm not saying that, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I would suggest that the three parties in the coalition have not covered themselves in glory. I would say that ACT and New Zealand First that are the leading proponents of all of that stuff that you've just described.
So what you're describing is Luxon is the worst Prime Minister New Zealand's ever had, and he's getting dog walked by the two minor parties. Yeah, let's put him in charge again then, shall we?
He's certainly been a disappointment, but
yeah,
I
but
think
look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I'm just being blunt. It's like you're describing the man who got elected to be the businessman in chief, who's been dog walked by the two minor leaders. We know that the Treaty Principles Bill wasn't a bottom line because Seymour told us. Yet Luxon's such a poor negotiator that he did it anyway, even though for Seymour it wasn't a bottom line. We want to put this guy in charge again. There is a lie about Christopher Luxon that New Zealand needs to hear. I don't know if you can swear on your podcast. You can bleep me out. He is not a fucking businessman. He sells himself as a businessman. He is not a fucking businessman. He's a board member. when we hear about businessmen in this economy to do with politics, we think about, oh, that guy who started up the small business. Oh, he grew it and he employed people. Oh, then they opened up a second branch. Oh, look at that businessman. He's a salesman that became a board member, that became a CEO. He's never built anything. He's never run a business that he started. He's a fucking board member. And this lie about this party of business needs to stop because it's not true.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, Pat. I guess my thinking is that if opportunity can keep out the worst of the extremes, because you can't keep out national, there will be another national government in the future, whether you like it or not. There'll be another Labour government in the future, and then another national after that, and another Labour after that, and on it will go. But if you can keep out the worst of the extremes, then that's a win for New Zealand.
If you're happy to give the country handfuls of shit rather than buckets of full, that's cool. I'm gonna try and feed them something that doesn't look like David Seymour's school lunches. That's where I'm going to throw in with.
It's the future for the podcast.
The future for the podcast. I mean, I'm not. It's a massive question. You know, I'd like to do this for a decade, but funding in this current climate is not easy. It's not. The American model for podcasts and independent media on the right is the companies and people supporting the right give them huge sums of money, and they fake it, and they fake it for long enough, losing money, that they make it. And we've actually seen that in New Zealand with the platform. Sean Plunkett got given $2 million to run his platform, and it's lost money ever since. And you can see that still today by him getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now he doesn't have studios. So like he's losing it hand over fist. New Zealand's not big enough to do that because there's not another $2 million coming in unless the New Zealand Initiative or, I don't know, Atlas or whatever conspiracy theorist group is going to throw more money at them. But I think the reality is the future of this, yeah, it's a hard question, because I'd like to keep on doing this for a very long time. But
how do you fund it at the moment? How do you manage it?
We have patrons, lovely patrons who are probably our biggest source of singular income. We get ad revenue from YouTube, Facebook. We also sell merchandise, and that's how we do it. But like the debates we're doing are wiping out anything we had sort of saved up and saved away. Like this is not there's no retirement scheme. There's no fucking Kiwi saver being paid amongst this. I'm very lucky that I live in Dunedin, and when I moved to Dunedin, I was able to purchase a house with a very small mortgage, so I live pretty simply.
And what brought you to Dunedin to start with?
Just really a change of life. I mean, yeah, I was in Auckland and married at the time, and yeah, we sold a house and wanted a change and came to Dunedin, and then quite quickly my marriage fell away, and I was like, I've got 3 children now in Dunedin. I've moved them. I can't really go back to Auckland, which all my income would have been because that's where the broadcasting is. But we came for a bit of an adventure and a change of life, and that was 12 years ago. Yeah. So look, I mean, if we kept doing what we're doing right now, I could do it forever, right? But for us, it's living pretty meagerly financially, which is fine. We're fine. Working with a mainstream media outlet, New Zealand On Air is terrible because they will only support content that plays on a mainstream media outlet. So whilst we're bigger than most mainstream media, certainly audio podcasts and that, like we're significantly bigger, New Zealand On Air won't talk to us because we don't play on RNZ or Stuff or MediaWorks. We go to RNZ and we have conversations with these people all the time, and they're always very, 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 congratulatory as to what we've done, but they don't want to, it would seem they don't want to work with us. And I think it's because in the mainstream media, you have this saying, content is king, content is king, content is king. What they're actually saying is our content is king, because our content can get I'll tell you something, and this is all public knowledge. There's a podcast called The Detail. It's made by Newsroom. It plays on RNZ. It's half an hour of audio podcast a day. I think it's the last 4 years that's had $3.5 million in funding from New Zealand on air. I think the biggest singular year was $800,000 of funding to make an audio podcast half an hour a day, 5 days a week. Why? Because it's on RNZ. So part of me is like, I don't really want to get involved in having to be funded that way. But the other part is, geez, that would make life a lot easier. So we'll just keep on keeping on. I've got a few other ideas for next year. The thing with us, I guess, is it's always content first. If it's content, there's a movie, I wonder if I can find it. There's a movie about Michael Jordan's shoes, actually. I can't see. You guys can cut this out. I'll just have a quick Google search to find it.
Is it the movie Air you're talking about?
Yeah, it is. But there's something in there that I just only recently watched the other day.
With Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, yeah?
Matt Damon. The guy who works for Nike. Not was a movie list. Nike designer. Okay, I'm not going to get it, but I'll just say what it is. In the movie Air, which is a story about how Michael Jordan got signed to Nike, one of the guys within the Nike, and this is a true part of the story, but he was within the Nike organization. I think he's the designer of the shoe. He had a list of 10 things that had to be done and had to happen to have a successful business. And point number 10 was, I don't remember the wording for it. It's something like, if you do good work, money will follow. If you do it well, if you do as good as you can, the money will follow. I think that what we've seen probably in the podcast, and when I say the money, it's no one's earning full-time salaries off this or anything. But I think if we continue to do what we're doing now, I think we'll be able to keep supporting it like we are. Got some more ideas for next year that are primarily driven by the content, but secondarily they might help a little bit of income as well. So yeah, I don't know, onwards and upwards. I always arrogantly think when I'm making content, I want to make award-winning content. It's a term I use, doesn't mean it's going to win awards, which is why when you see the upcoming debates, I'm hoping that what you see will be comparable to what you're going to see on TVNZ and what you're going to see on TV3. That's my objective, to get those looking and feeling like they're worth $1 million, because that's what I like to do.
Your other option, Pat, for a side hustle to earn a bit of extra money is the Michael Laws route. You can keep your program, but also run for office. You're not tempted to run for office at any point?
No,
whether
I don't think so.
Local government or central government?
Nah, I haven't got time for that. I've got a bunch of work I'm supposed to do. Just so you know, I have to go. I've got dinner at 7:30. I've booked it out. So maybe one more question and then I'm out.
That's good. I think, it's been great talking to you, Pat. And yeah, I think we've covered the ground. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's very strange to be on this side of the microphone, but hopefully you got what you wanted, and I appreciate you giving us some time.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. That's all from the Otago Opportunity today. Thanks for listening, and please join us next time.
This programme was approved by H.Cargo, Secretary at opportunity.org.nz.